Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ventures, where my guests and I get to explore entrepreneurial stories, market landscapes, problem spaces, and examine together how new ventures can be started, either for-profit, nonprofit, personal ventures, to benefit humanity. Today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Gabe Coyne. He is a technologist, creative, an entrepreneur, and we explore how business people can find CTOs, can find technical co-founders to help their ventures get up and running. And we talk about a lot of advice for those of you who may become what has been termed in the industry a unicorn, somebody who can come up with an idea, have a vision for a product, build that product, and even go through the first couple of years like Gabe did with one of his main startups, where he did most of the development himself. So with this show, if you are watching, you can listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. And if you're listening, you can visit wclittle.com, and there you can watch the episode and get links to all of the different topics that we talk about today, so that you can be better informed about how to find a technical co-founder, develop those skills yourself. And we talk a lot today about the practice of doing, expanding your network, meeting new people, and learning by doing. And the nuances of that, specifically with Gabe's story, I'm excited to share with you all. So please enjoy this conversation with Gabe Coyne. All right, Gabe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Will. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. All right, you want to start and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey thus far?
Yeah, so my name's Gabe Coyne. As I always tell people, my career has been a split of creative and technical. A lot of people like to call that the unicorn, which I do feel you're seeing more of these days, but I have been a rarity in most situations I've been in, that people are like, wait a minute, you can design it and build it to scale? That's weird. But that's been what I've loved from the beginning. The career beginning is probably, high school. I was trying to figure out what to do for my senior project, and I was looking at painting a mural in the high school gym, and then the career counselor said, "Have you ever thought about web design?" And I don't know how the heck she decided to ask me that, but I was always good at math and good at art, and I was like, that sounds cool, because I was basically trying to figure out, I had looked at it at one point. I was like, how do I get pictures of me and my buddies snowboarding online, right? I had messed around with Photoshop, and so I like the technical side of the creative. And I was like, well, how do you get this stuff online? And from what I read, I was like, seems way more complicated than I thought it would be, right? Because I'd gotten in with Photoshop, figured it out, and now this whole internet thing seemed really complicated. So I was like, sure, I'll take my senior project 60 hours and go figure that out. So I did that. And then there was a guy who worked in the school library. He was the IT guy at the school, and he was the IT guy at a few different schools. His name was Josh Nelson. Turns out he owned a chain of cell phone stores, saw my senior project, and hired me to go run the website at his cell phone chain.
Nice.
Right. So right out of high school.
In high school.
Yeah, right out of high school. And I was like, okay. And the thing was kind of sticking. I enjoyed it. It was kind of like this nice balance of creative and technical, and I was enjoying it. So yeah, I got to stop bussing tables and go build websites immediately through college. Went to college for graphic design and web design, and got to work this job throughout. Toward the end, I got an internship in package design. So I got to get into print, and we did a bunch of packaging design for Nancy Drew video games and for heating packs. And we redid the book cover series for Zoo Books. So I got to do some fun stuff while I was there. I think we actually did a Frango box and some wine labels. So I got to have this crazy breadth of experience, super early on. Got out of college, got hired to go to a document management company where I was going to be kind of a designer, but pretty quickly we realized that I could help him rebuild his whole system. So started getting into PHP and built this whole crazy document rendering imaging farm in downtown Seattle. Had a ton of fun with that. Got a little too technical, and so I needed a little bit more creativity. So I went back and worked at a design agency for a while. And I didn't stay there very long because I had, I think, a couple kids at this point, and I was working at the agency and doing some side work, and I got to the point where I was making just as much on the side work in 2 hours a day before I'd go to work as I was making all day at work.
Right.
And I was like, I think I can probably make this work. So I jumped ship, started my own creative services and technical consulting company. Had some cool clients out of the gate. One was Mod Systems, which was they were trying to kind of compete with Netflix in the early days. Netflix was shipping CDs. They thought that they could get people to rent movies on SD cards at a Blockbuster or at an airport. Didn't really work. They also, their CEO ended up embezzling $30 million from Toshiba, and that company tanked. But I did meet Anthony Bay, who ended up, I think, pretty much building Amazon Prime Video after he left Mod Systems. So that play kind of worked out for him. He did end up getting into video and making it big. So I ran my own thing, and then throughout my career did some different things, but always was technical and design, and always enjoying building products. At my creative studio, we ended up building a CMS in the early days because we didn't like trying to meet our clients' needs on Drupal or Joomla or WordPress. It always seemed like a lot of work to wrangle these things to do what you wanted. So we built our own, hosted clients for a long time. I've had a lot of things in my career that I did at a low level where other people killed it, right? So I built my CMS, and then Squarespace happened, right? I built a photo site in the early days, and then Flickr and Google Photos happened. I built a finance app way in the early days, and then Mint happened, right? So I always liked to build stuff, but I didn't know how to build stuff to scale, how to build a company on a technology or a product. I could build stuff, make stuff look great, but scaling it, I didn't know how to do. So I got to the phase in my creative studio kind of freelance world where I started building prototypes for startups, and I was working with 4 different founders building their prototypes, and they were all courting me to be their co-founding CTO. And I went down to San Diego to an event with one of them, and I was getting the prototypes for all of them. And then I got approached by one of my old clients who I had built bouncyhouse.com for. And we had a good working relationship. He was an awesome guy who had a big win back in the day. He had built a company to 80 million top line. This is who ended up being my business partner, Daniel Todd. He approaches me about building a startup. He's like, hey, had a couple conversations. I raised a little money in one day, and I need a technical co-founder, and you were my first phone call. And all these other co-founders have been pitching me, and I was like, I don't know that any of them had a win before. It was a lot more high risk. I didn't feel confident enough to bail on what I was doing. And most of them was the founder pitch of hey, take a 50% pay cut and come take this huge risk with me. And I wasn't quite ready to do that. But when Dan approached me, I was like, let's do it. I think you're the guy who can make this happen. And I think I can build whatever the heck you want to build. And so we went for it, and we started building what is now Influence Mobile, which started as a celebrity shopping rewards browser plugin and evolved into something else. And lately he's been messaging me saying, he's like, hey, guess who just sold for $1 billion? And it's Honey, which is the browser shopping app.
Mm.
right? That tells you how to get discounts on all these things. When we pivoted out of browser apps, you're like, there's no future in browser apps, right? We got to go mobile. And now we're like, all right, a few people have made it happen. Oh well. Influence Mobile's making other things happen, right? So we did pivot to mobile, and we started doing fan reward apps for pro sports and celebrities, and we ended up building our own custom advertising network that for our partners, it outperforms Facebook Audience Network. So that has worked out, and that is scaling, and Influence Mobile is still running. Then I met these awesome guys at Prota partway through my Influence Mobile story, and it was toward the end of my year 5 or 6 at Influence Mobile, and I was starting to feel the itch to go build new things again, because we've been building this thing for longer than I'd ever focused on something before in my life. Right? It was like 6 years on one thing. There was a ton of amazing things about that. We built the team to 55 employees. We hit some crazy top lines throughout. We had a 12,000 square foot office space. And it was never been my dream to run a big company. I like to build something and see it catch momentum, but to manage 25 people day to day was not what I love doing anymore, right? I love to get down in the weeds and solve the big problems early on and write the code and do the design. And I'm evolving over time. But I was excited to go start new things. So now I'm at Prota, and we're having the chance to work with all kinds of huge, like Fortune 10 companies. I've had the opportunity to fly around the country and meet all kinds of awesome people with different problems and build products and prototypes. And now I'm having the opportunity, at Prota, we're getting to do all this cool stuff. And, at Prota, we incubate new companies. And I've had the opportunity to start one of my first startups where I'm the CEO, which I wasn't sure that I'd ever do that. But I'm enjoying it. So we're building Stix, which is mid-market golf clubs for the regular golfer. It's the Harry's Razor of golf clubs, where you got starter sets for super cheap, and once you want to upgrade, starter set for $250, upgrade for $2,000, and there's not a lot in the middle. And on both ends, we don't love the design trends that are happening in golf. So we're saying, hey, let's make a super minimalist, black on black on black, great looking set of clubs that perform just as well as the rest of them at a medium price point, and let's see what happens. And so far, it's been validation after validation after validation that people want it. They love the design, they love the price, and when they get them in their hands, they love how they feel. So that's the story from high school to design and tech to venture studio to startup on either end, software, hardware. I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to play in all those sandboxes with incredible people and have a ton of fun along the way, and somehow be able to survive all this high-risk startup life and have 4 kids along the way, and couldn't be happier.
Nice, man. Nice. Glad to have you on the show. Lots to dive into here. So let's start all the way back. So you're in high school.
Yeah.
You have creative talent. You get introduced to the digital world, and then you're thinking about college. So let's talk about college for a minute. There are people watching or listening that are either advising youth or are youth themselves that are considering what to do.
Yeah.
What did you decide back then? Obviously, it was a different day back then around everyone goes to college. But now people are deciding whether to go to college or not,
right,
especially in light of the pandemic and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what was it like for you? What were you thinking about college and improving your skills and improving your trade? And then what advice do you have for people today when they're thinking about whether or not to do that?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I feel comfortable answering that. I've got 4 kids, and I got to kind of answer that for them too, right? And I didn't take a traditional route. And I think at this point I would encourage that. I personally was not interested in more like education, like just prereqs to get into my major. I was like, I want to go learn this stuff. I'm doing this stuff. I'm doing design and development, and I want to learn more, right? So I wanted to get right into it. So I went to community college and got 2 vocational degrees, right? And then they were like, well, you should go to a 4-year and get a bachelor's, but then you got to like go to the prereqs and get it more. And I'm already like running a business, making money doing this stuff. And that wasn't for me. Now, so I don't know, everybody's a different personality type, right? I'm very entrepreneurial, always have been. For my kids, I probably have a few different types, right? I've got my oldest that may be better off going to a 4-year potentially. My second oldest is pretty dang entrepreneurial, right? He's mowing all the neighbors' lawns, taking the money, building a custom PC so that he's like streaming and doing gaming online, but he's also like taught himself how to video edit. So now I've already hired him to do video editing for a few projects. Now, since he built his custom PC, now he's got ads on Facebook Marketplace to build custom PCs for other people. And somebody already hit him. Nice. And now he's building his first custom PC for a customer, and he's 12 years old, right? So for him, I can see him being the same way, where it's like, dude, you're gonna have a hard time sitting through school because you're gonna be like, kind of like I was like I've learned a little bit. Now I want to come to like up my game. And then I got there, and it just felt like everything was 101. And I came out like just being as prepared as I already was, right? Like you come to school, and I went the track I went. So for people thinking about it now, I don't know. I've worked with some people who come out of code schools and they're awesome. I've also worked with people who come out of code schools and they're not awesome. Mm-hmm. And that has less to do with the code school than the person, right? Like you can teach yourself, or you can go to a code school, or you can go to a 4-year or whatever. I think Google's even released articles saying, sometimes the more attractive candidates are the ones without a big school name, because sometimes people with the big school behind them just have confidence in that more so than the person who's just been scrappy and hungry and figured it out along the way. That says something more about them to even some of the big employers. And I know for my career, my career has just been a growing report card, right? Everything I do, I look at as this is my next portfolio piece, right? Mm-hmm. Everything I touch needs to be my next best piece of work that's going to grow my opportunities, right? And I think if you approach life like that, it doesn't really matter what channel you take, right? If you go to school and you say, hey, every class is going to be my best work, right? And if you don't go to school and you go to code school or you do it on your own, you say, hey, every piece of code I write is going to be my next best. Every project that I complete is going to be my best work to date. Opportunities are always going to grow and open up.
That's good, man. Yeah. So what advice would you have? Let's say high school grad, they're creative, they're kind of tinkering with technology. They're wondering where to go or what classes to take or how to improve their skills. Obviously it totally depends on the person, but generally speaking, how would you advise someone who's in that position?
I'd say look at your education options, but I've also always enjoyed a paid education. There's no better education than getting paid to do work, right? And figure it out as you go. And honestly, in my experience, the best people are the people who can figure stuff out on the fly. And for me, that's actually my learning style. I can't go to a class and just absorb information unless I'm doing it, right? The only way I learn is by doing stuff, right? I couldn't listen to how to write code. I need to start writing code, hit a wall, go figure it out, get past that wall, right? Like that's the only way my brain absorbs information. So again, there's a lot of personality types out there. There's a lot of learning styles out there. Maybe the most important thing is to understand who you are, how you learn, what type, like, do you operate well in a classroom environment, in an online learning environment? Would you be better as an apprentice where you can work next to somebody who's an expert? Is an internship more valuable in some situations than others? That's probably the most important thing, because I think some people that think code school is a magical answer, like, they're not built for it. And that's one thing I'd say too. Everything we do at Prota and everything that I love to do is test and validate, test and validate. So do that with your education and your career. And whenever you test and validate, run the smallest test possible to get your results. Don't go to a 4-year college to run the test, right? Do one online coding challenge. Do you love it? Are you good at it? Because I've known people that have tried to like white knuckle their way into coding, and it just hasn't paid off. I had a guy, I won't mention his name. It wouldn't help or hurt either way. But I brought him onto my creative studio. He was a print designer. Still loves print. I turned him into a developer. He was building PHP sites on the CMS that we built, implementing them for clients. Then I brought him into the Influence Mobile startup, turned him into a Rails developer, and years in, he's doing it, but it never was natural. It never picked up momentum.
Yeah.
He was like a very good, diligent worker, so he kept finding a way to make it work. But, years later, it was finally like, I just need to go do something else. And he got back into print, and he was happier than ever. Now he gets to do print, and he started a brewery. So, you got to find what you're passionate about, and what you can be great at. One thing we did at Influence Mobile that I love, we did the Strength Finders test. Right? You guys familiar with this? There was an experiment run on a group of students, and they took, of the group, they did a speed reading test. And they had a bunch of kids that were fast and a bunch of kids that were slow at reading, right? And then they said, okay, let's put them all through a speed reading course, and let's see if we can level the playing field here, right? What happened was the kids that were slow at reading improved 10 or 15%. Great. The kids that were already good at reading, they improved 300%, right? So find the thing that you're already good at and pour water on that thing, because that's what's going to grow the fastest. That's my advice.
That's good, man. So let's talk about co-founding a venture. So your role as CTO, what was it in the early days? What did it turn into? Because 5-6 year go at it, I'm sure you learned a ton. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, day one, it was the two of us, right? And it was, before I even committed to it, I think Dan said, hey, here's the general idea. What do you think? And of course I was like, well, let me go build a quick version with it. So like, I think day one, I wrote a quick little app that was a browser app that would put an icon next to search results, just proving like, okay, I can work in this stack. I get it. You manipulate web pages and you try to like influence purchasing decisions, and that works. Or else, so like quick turnaround, proof of concept, which is what I love to do. That was day one. Like, hey, here's the vision. Go build a sample as quickly as possible. And honestly, that's been, that's what we did day after day. All right, let's build a product. Let's build a roadmap. Let's just keep iterating. And then Dan's out selling the thing, right? He's going and landing celebrity partnerships. And I'm trying to keep up with enough of a demo, right, that it's a good sales tool, while also trying to take the demo and turn it into a real thing for once we start landing these deals and figure out how all that stuff works. And super early on, we landed Jillian Michaels, and that was like a super, super exciting day where we did our first launch, and we're watching the analytics, and we're like, oh, Jillian Michaels just posted on social media, and traffic goes nuts. Nice. So those were exciting days. And for quite a while, I don't know how long it was, like I was just building everything, right? It may have been, trying to think who our first developer hire was. We might have been a couple years in before we hired many people.
Oh, wow.
And when we did, it's like anything, right? You're trying to prove the concept and you're trying to create the hockey stick. And once that hockey stick hits, then we just started hiring like crazy, right? So yeah, and the one fun story about Influence Mobile is we went to a Facebook audience network launch event in Seattle, right? So Facebook audience, hard to believe, didn't exist at one point. Facebook did not have, what was it? They didn't have direct advertising, or maybe this is when Facebook let you run Facebook ads in your app, right? There had been Google Ad Mob, there had been a handful of others, but this was the day you could take like what's in the Facebook feed for ads and put that in your app to monetize your app. And so we go to this thing, and we had hit a few snags with other advertisers as what they would allow, right? Because we're running these we're running reward apps, right? And most advertisers don't want, especially in that day, incentivized advertising is like the F word of the advertising industry. Was, who knows? But basically, that was not cool. What's a magical word today is rewarded video. That sounds a lot like incentivized advertising, doesn't it? But we were like toeing the line of the timeline here, trying to reward people for interacting with ad content to run this fan rewards program. And so at this Facebook audience event, we say, hey, do you guys have any like stipulations or rules about incentivized advertising? And they were like, no, go for it. And we were like, see ya. And we went and we implemented it, and we freaking blew up because it works. And we were working with Facebook to try to figure out like, hey, it's working on our end. How's the value on your end? And we were in those conversations with them to try to figure this whole thing out. So that's a side story on your question of the evolution of CTO in a startup that sticks around for 6 years. Yeah. So it started building the product. Then we started to scale. Then it was building the team, which, probably like many startups started, I believe, I'm trying to think if we started with interns and some code school guys. And then we started hiring more senior as we went, hired a VP of engineering at one point to try to just help manage, because I was still very much like, I'm 2 years into the code base. I'm like all the tribal knowledge.
Right.
I'm the fastest at execution on deploying code. So our challenge was always for that type of founder who's like built the whole thing. So sometimes the founders are different, right? Like I went to a few CTO dinners in Seattle and met CTOs from a lot of different companies. And some CTOs are always like, I came in, I built the team. I've always been high level overseeing it. But for the startup that starts with a CTO that's like built everything, it's really dang hard to shift the tides, to build a team that can outpace you. That was our challenge. I don't know that we ever got there. Even when we had a 22-person engineering team that was like QA, back end, front end, senior, junior, all kinds of people, it was still very difficult to optimize people inside the system to outpace the guy that had built it from scratch, right? And I think you probably hear more than one story about that type of scenario.
Right.
But I think that's what needs to happen, and you need to move from the Zuckerberg move fast and break things to the move fast and don't break things. Right. That was his evolution, and the bigger you get, the more money you're making, the more costly those mistakes are. So Influence Mobile has been able to make the transition now to like, let's just not break stuff, because I was fast, but I broke stuff. They'll tell you that every time. And so I think it needed a different type of personnel to get it to move fast and don't break things. And I think many of us have worked with both types of people, and the people who don't break things can be really frustrating to work with because they don't ship stuff as fast as you like. And then the people who do ship stuff as fast as you like can be frustrating because it goes out to the door and then it has issues. So I think this is the world we live in.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody's found the perfect balance, and I'd love to see you on the podcast and hear how you did that. But that's been my story. Yeah. So that was the evolution. You move from execution to management, and maybe you like that, maybe you don't. I struggled with it. I'm enjoying Stix right now because I'm forced. I can't do everything. That's the beauty of Stix, right? I have a hard time managing people where I could do it better. With Stix, I can't do most of it. I can't build golf clubs. I needed PR people. I needed social media people. I've got R&D people. I've got industrial design people. I'm all good managing a team of people that are awesome and can do everything better than I can. That's the only kind of team I want to manage. I don't want to manage. And there's a quote from the founder of Airbnb that just said, always hire better, right? Always hire people that are better than you at something. And I would agree with that 100%. You don't want to be managing a bunch of people that you could do it better than. And maybe some people have found a lot of success with hiring junior talent and leveraging that. And I think there's a place for that. But in my experience and in my future, I think I will always try to follow that rule of hire better.
So one of the most common questions in startup land is, where do I find a technical co-founder? I'd imagine a lot of people watching or listening are thinking, where do I find somebody like Gabe to join my venture? What advice do you have for the business people out there that are looking for a technical co-founder? And obviously, you have both the creative and the software engineering combined, but that's super rare. But it comes with the advantages and disadvantages, as you talked about. But what advice would you have for these business people that are looking for this type of person?
I don't know. I've not been good at that recruiting piece, I don't think, so far in my career. The Stix team that has come together is kind of mind-blowing, but it's probably all been unconventional, right? Literally, I've got people coming out of the woodwork that I've hired that I'm like, it's just crazy. That it's just been from my network. So like I'd say, if anything, just always be building your network, right? And, I think that's one downside of being in-house somewhere too long, is you're just not meeting people, right? One of the best things I love about freelance or agency or studio is that you're always meeting people and running projects, and those people go places and meet more people. And like I said, make everything you touch your next best work, and take care of people and establish good relationships throughout. And that's always going to be where I think those things are going to come from, right? You're going to be like, oh man, I knew this guy. I mean, that's how Dan found me. We had worked on a project together, right? And that's how I found most of my Stix team. It's people that I've worked on projects with at Prota and throughout my career. That some of them are direct like that, and then some of them are, because I've met them through Prota or through old connections, and it became very easy if you have that foundation of a network. And I've never been like the networking guy. I don't go to a lot of these events and network that way. I don't do coffees and lunches and dinners just to meet people. For me, it's all been doing the work with people, right? So if anybody's at a full-time gig, I would take every opportunity you can to run a side hustle just to meet people, right? If you have the opportunity to advise with a startup or build some small thing, like I think that's, because even if you network and you just meet somebody at an event or you have lunch, you kind of don't really know what it's like to work with them. So I would say build your career in a way that you can work with as many people as possible over time.
That's good. So let's say a non-technical founder, their network is expanding, they're following that advice, and then they have a few options. They either find the hero developer that's going to go into a silo and build an app similar to what you did, or maybe they have a little bit of friends and family money. They're going to hire some dev shop to build an MVP for them. Obviously, there's advantages and disadvantages of either side. Can you talk a little bit about those advantages and disadvantages? Because this is such a hot topic a lot of people
Yeah.
building ventures, trying to figure out how to actually create the technology. What advice would you have for those non-technical founders interviewing their network?
Yeah. So our options are, you have a network, you've identified a potential that would be a skin in the game co-founder, right? Or you said you've got some friends and family and you're going to hire a dev shop. Are those our two options we're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, or other options. I'm curious how you would coach someone through the process.
Yeah. I think part of the answer is similar to the education answer in that you want to find a good personality fit, right? As a co-founder, that's going to be super important because any kind of like conflict between the co-founders at the early stage could blow the whole thing up, right? So you want to find a good relational fit, whether that's a co-founder or uh, a dev shop, and having lunch with a person, even if you guys kind of hit it off. One thing that um, helped me decide about Dan was we had worked together and we'd been through some ups and downs on both sides, and we both handled it very amicably, right? If you've worked with somebody and you hit a little conflict and it becomes a super stressful, tense, hot-headed situation, that's not somebody you want to get super deeply involved with for the long term, right? So again, back to the validation, can you run any kind of small validation with either of those scenarios? I've given this relationship advice before too. Cause a fight. Cause a fight early on and see how it goes, right? If you're dating someone, within the first month or two, just raise a real hot topic, right? That's just destined for conflict. Because the conflict resolution and the ability to disagree and get through it with a co-founder or even a vendor type dev shop, that's going to tell you a lot before you get too deep. I don't know how helpful that'll be to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's extremely important advice. I mean, often the citations for why startups fail is often, we ran out of money, the competition outbeat us, or it was our product's fault, or, or something. They blame something. But usually it has to do, in my experience, has to do with conflict internally that results in a lack of operational efficiency, and
Right.
then that ends up tanking the company. So I think you're spot on to point that out at the beginning, for sure. So I remember when we first started working together, I heard you had a desire to kind of become a serial CTO or kind of work on in a CTO capacity in multiple environments. And I think that's kind of a dream job for a lot of people. How do you get into a position where you can do that sort of thing? How do you position yourself so you can perform that kind of work?
Yeah. Well, my dream was to be an angel developer, right? That I could pick my projects and come in and not be a financial weight on the startup, but be able to give them significant trajectory, right? That was kind of my dream. The biggest play there is establishing financial independence, right? So you can do that. I don't know that there's a world that you can play that significant of a role unless you are like, listen, I'm going to do 90 days to get you from A to B. And CTO again is a broad term, right? Am I a CTO that's going to come in, like establish your infrastructure and get you a prototype that can go to a certain scale, and I can do that in 90 days? I think there's a play for that guy probably all day long, but it's also complicated because with a startup, they don't really want a 90-day see you later unless you're going to build a team in that time, right? That's the only way you can serial CTO thing. I'm going to come in, architect your infrastructure, get you a prototype, and get you a team ramped up, and then I'm out. That might be minimum 6-month type of operation, which is, there's that level of CTO. That's a unique offering, I think.
Yeah.
I think most CTOs like to come in after that.
Right.
They're like, okay, I see you've got a little bit of a team here and you've got kind of a product. Let me come in and like stabilize and optimize this thing for scale. Like that's definitely another level of CTO. For that startup CTO, I think there's a place for that. And again, I think the only way to really do the dream is to get a win one way or another, right? To get a capital gains event, whether that's doing work for partial equity or full equity where you can, to kind of get a mix of your cash jobs and your equity jobs so that something can hit. My first house down payment was because I did a project for a startup. I built their prototype and kind of optimized their infrastructure. But I did it at a 50% discount because they didn't have the funds. But I wrote it into the contract. I said, listen, if this prototype gets you funded, you pay the other half, right? And, the more you can be creative in the way you write your contracts like that you can come into a company that doesn't have the funds, but you're going to get them where they need to go. And then that should be rewarded either with equity for the long term or with a cash bonus. Because, those are the people you want to work with anyways, the people that you say, listen, I can create value, right? Like I'm here to create value, not just to create a prototype. I'm here to move your product and company forward. And if I get you there, let's reward that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that creativity is super important. So let's talk about Stix.
Yeah.
So you're in a network with a bunch of different people, industrial designers, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. You have an idea. Where did the idea come from? Talk about the origin story and how did you start validating it? Yeah.
I don't know how many startup ideas start this way, maybe many of them, but it was my personal experience, right? I was on my second set of clubs. My first set was a $20 set from a church rummage sale that was completely mismatched, completely too big for me. And I bought my first set of my own when I was like 17 at Big Five, some brand that's not even around anymore. But I liked the look and I liked the price when I bought them. I bought them, used them for 20 years, and I was golfing more. And I was like, okay, I feel like I could use an upgrade. These are pretty old. There's got to be like updated technology. I don't even know how bad these things are that I'm swinging with, right? So I go shopping and I don't like my options, right? I'm like $250 for a starter set, $2,000 for a top brand, and like not a lot of great options in between. And I'm not crazy about the design on either end. So I was like, I wonder how many people feel similarly, right? So I've talked a few times on this call about validation, right? Do as little as you can, as quickly as you can to see if you're crazy, right? So I ran a super quick test on pickfu.com where I took Strata at $250, TaylorMade at like $900 just for irons. And then I ran Stix. I said, well, what if Stix were like $600 just for irons? So this is like before Stix was a thing. I whipped up a logo. Kyle, the industrial designer, Kyle Buzzard, world-class industrial designer, who was in my network, who was like, we knew each other well enough that we were like, and he's in the Prota ecosystem, that he was like, yeah, I can get you a few 3D models of a golf club. And he actually had a ton of fun just playing with that concept. And we throw up these clubs, and with PickFU, you get like 50 responses in 15 minutes for $50. And the feedback, all I needed to know is like, does everybody like my option? Does nobody like my option, right? Is everybody like, no way, golf clubs are rocket science. There's no way you can do it for $600. But basically, we captured about 30% of this market, right? This 50 people. You had some people pick TaylorMade for the price. They were willing to pay the price for brand recognition and a trusted brand, and they've maybe used them before. And then with the Strata starter set, it was like, I don't even golf, so I'm just going to get the cheapest one. You're like, that makes sense. But then there was a series of people that were like, I love this design, and it seems like it's kind of in between, so I'm going with this one. So we ran a series of those, but each step of the way, it was basically like, okay, let's move this validation forward one more step. We had some people out of this completely random 50 people want this. Now what happens if we ask actual golfers? So we run Facebook ads against golfers to a landing page and try to see who of those convert. And then we learn a bunch there about, oh, looks like it's all a certain, it's all 18 to 34-year-old males, and they all want black on black on black, and they're all comfortable with this type of price point and this type of build materials. So validate to the point where we're like, okay, seems like people want this, and we're converting people at like a reasonable rate. And so we start checking into manufacturers, try to see, okay, can we actually build this thing? What does that whole process look like? Which is super fun, right? My background is software, and suddenly I'm dealing with Chinese manufacturers to build golf clubs, right? So it wasn't like, the idea wasn't even, how do I use my skill set of software development and design to like build something? It was just, hey, this seems like a big need potentially. And we love the Harry's Razor story of, Gillette's trying to sell you blades for $8, and it just seems like it's getting out of control. Dollar Shave Club and Harry's come along, and they kind of call BS on the whole thing. And they're like, we can create a great blade and a good looking handle for half the price. And a ton of people were on board. So we're trying to say the same thing in golf, right? We're not going to claim to be creating the next best technology. We're saying we're going to create the current technology and cut the price in half and sell it direct to consumer, make sure it looks amazing and different from everything else. And people seem to be resonating with it.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate your time. Where can people find more about Stix? Where can they find more about you online?
Yeah, you can go to stix.golf, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And about me, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really have another web presence these days. I'm also on the Prota Ventures website. You can find my LinkedIn link. And yeah, right now, any amount of feedback from anybody, we would love to hear on Stix. Depending on where you're at in the country, we'd love to get these clubs in as many people's hands as we can, just for live feedback. We're hoping to be hosting some demo events at Top Golfs around the country and golf courses around the country. So if you want us to come to you, let us know on Facebook. We'll try to get you on the tour.
Awesome. Sounds good. We'll make sure to put links to all that in the show notes. Definitely appreciate your time. Lots to dive into here, and we'll look forward to hopefully getting a follow-up conversation sometime soon. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Will.
Yeah, appreciate your time. All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about health science, emerging technology, software development, startups, and a variety of different topics that we talk about on this show. So you can visit wclittle.com and hit the subscribe button, or you can actually subscribe to specific topics that you care about most. Number two, I have a portfolio company with my partners and I at Prota Ventures called Startup Rocket. If you visit startuprocket.com, there, if you are spinning up a new venture, you can receive customized coaching for your business model and the vertical that you're tackling. And it's a place for you and your teammates and your advisors and your investors to be all on the same page to make sure that you're not missing anything as you go about the important entrepreneurial work that you're about to get yourself into, or that you have been into for quite some time. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're watching, you can listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. And if you're listening, you can visit wclittle.com to view the episodes and check out the show notes for following up in more detail for any of the topics that we talk about. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you watch or listen to this show, that would be super helpful, help get the word out, and helps other people consume and interact with this content. Thank you.